nobody knows any of the ingredients in KFC's chicken except the Colonel, and he's dead, right? I don't know if that's true, but you know what I mean.
Well, somebody must know.
They've been making up since the day he died. And according to these websites...
Colonel Sanders actually made enough spice kits to last an eternity before he died. It's actually what killed him. Welcome to Theoretical Nonsense, the Big Bang Theory watch-along podcast. No PhD required.
We're the podcast that recaps all the episodes of the Big Bang Theory. No spoilers.
So hop into your favorite spot,
make yourself a grasshopper,
and enjoy the ride. Hello there, Ryan.
Hello, Rob.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing amazing because we just watched Season 3, Episode 13 of The Big Bang Theory, The Bozeman Reaction.
Oh, yeah.
For any new listeners out there, I'm Rob, this is my co-host Ryan, and we are Theoretical Nonsense, the podcast that recaps, reviews, and deep dives facts from The Big Bang Theory, which we call IQ points. As a reminder to everyone, I've seen the series multiple times, but this is Ryan's first time watching, so we do our best to do no spoilers. And Ryan has been told he's very similar to Sheldon, so we keep a point tally of how close Ryan is to Sheldon as well.
Right now, that tally is at 84 points throughout the whole series so far, being not like Sheldon, 87 being like Sheldon. So
I wonder if this
like Sheldon so far.
I feel like you're always going to be slightly Sheldon. Not to spoil the entire series, but
it's no spoilers, right?
Yeah, no spoilers. But you're
Sheldon, bitch. What?
Well, a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. Don't forget to email us at theoreticalnonsensepod@gmail.com. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Theoretical Nonsense Pod. And since the Bozeman Reaction is a crime episode, I thought I would give a little update on the true crime incident that has happened in my life.
Ooh, I have a little surprise too, but I want to hear about the true crime.
Well, if you're first-time listener or haven't listened to all of our episodes, there has been a true crime incident that has happened in my world, not directly to me, but the whole story is going to be on our episode 22, which is season 2, episode 4, The Griffin Equivalency. It's about like the first 45 minutes of the episode. I kind of go into depth of what happened, and it was a doozy. So we've been following the court case. But basically, unfortunately, there's not a lot of information. Because nothing has really happened. Our judicial system runs really smooth. I was hoping to have more of a substantial update for this crime episode, but unfortunately, I don't. But by the time this episode airs, my neighbor, who is the defendant, she will have been... it's in my area, it's called Call to the List, which I've actually already mentioned last time, like a couple of months ago during our last episode. So that moment has finally come, and it's happening on May 20th. So we'll find out if she wants to advance, essentially. So the Call of the List is the final opportunity to make a plea deal. So she could either basically plea and just kind of basically plead guilty, or she could just say, you know what? No, I want a trial.
I think I want to see her go to trial because she might have, it seems like she's going to be pleading self-defense, but he was shot in the back while running away, so that's going to be a little tough, or that's what it seemed like, right? We don't know all the details exactly, but it seemed like that.
It's tough because, it sounds like she was in a position where she was defending herself, but then she, according to, the law and everything, she took it to that next step, that next level where it becomes not self-defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel bad for her because if the story is true of what was going on, I mean, the guy kind of had it coming.
Yeah.
But at the same,
if she hadn't done it, he might have come back and gotten revenge. He seemed like he was trouble.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it kind of sucks that she's been in jail this entire time. Like that episode aired like over a year ago.
wow.
So she's just been in jail like this entire time, just waiting for her trial. So, but
That's rough.
unfortunately, that's the only update that I have. So nothing substantial. Hopefully, in the next couple episodes, we'll have some more significant updates. And I actually did want to give a quick shout out to Bridget, who actually sent us an old email a while ago about a crime that she witnessed. It's the bus one. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah,
shooting, right?
yeah, we Bridget, we requested to you an update if you've been keeping track of that trial. So I
Yeah.
really want to know what happened
What's
with
going
that.
on? And I thought that was awesome because she had just listened to our podcast about how to turn and when to stop for buses, and then
Yeah,
it went down. So
I know. Imagine if we didn't talk about that and she just drove on.
who knows
May
what
not
else
have
we
even
would?
seen it.
Yeah. What?
You had
So,
something to share?
I read Flatland,
The whole thing?
the whole thing.
I guess it was a novella, so I guess it is
Uh,
short. But how is it?
yeah. Uh, it's not really a novel. It's not really like a story like that. It's broken up into three categories: a square that lives in Flatland, and he basically explains his world a lot of just narrative explaining what's going on, like their practices. And then he has a dream that he goes into, what is it called? Point land, line land, where there's things that are one dimensional. And then he wakes up and is taken into space land where things are three dimensional. And it's pretty obvious that, they were talking about that it was satire about uh, classism at the time. And I think to some degree it's still like that in society. But basically there's no way for these shapes to know what shape they are except to touch each other and to feel each other's angles. And they started judging each other by that. And then the elite basically said, we have the superpower that we can see your angles and we know what you are. And we can just tell you that you're worthless. And so it was really about, like, the higher classes being able to dictate and rule everything with an iron fist, however they want. And also a lot of what's the word, misogyny. It really plays up how little people thought of women, because in the story women are triangles and those are like the lowest class, and they're like told to be very, very fragile, not very intelligent. In fact, all education's kept from them because women can't handle it. And they're so delicate, but they have spikes because they're triangles that if they sneeze or if they get too emotional, they've been known to kill men randomly with their spikes. So like it's really pointing out how women were like seen as lower class and inferior to men. And also like looking at how, you know, uh, we talked in the last episode about how this kind of jump started the notion that there could be other dimensions out there, and it does that. But it's more about how it's kind of like Plato's The Cave allegory, right? Where if somebody's taken out of the cave and goes back in, everybody laughs at him, like, "Oh, you saw the real world. You're making shit up. This cave is the real world," type thing. Where this guy goes to a three-dimensional world and goes back to Flatland, and everybody, not only do they think he's making it up, but they like lock him up and throw away the key, so he's locked in prison for the rest of his life. And no matter which land he goes to, either the one-dimensional land, the two-dimensional land, three-dimensional land, everybody just kind of thinks that they're God. And so, like, the spheres in three-dimensional land are like, we're better than you. He's like, well, what about four-dimension land? And the sphere's like, there is no such thing. We are masters of everything. And then, and one-dimensional land, they're basically like, you're a liar, you're making stuff up. Also, in one-dimensional land, men have two voices, and since you can't really move or see people in one dimension, they sing to each other, and that's how they impregnate each other. And men have two voices, and since the main character only has one voice, the like leader of one dimension land keeps calling him a woman, He's like, "Woman, get out of my way. You have one voice." So again, with that, pointing out women as inferior. But anyways, the whole thing is, I can see why Sheldon would like it. That it's a mind exercise of trying to imagine not only what could things be like outside of 3 dimensions, but how could you imagine things. Like, it really spells out what 2 dimensions would look like and how you would have to explain 3 dimensions to a 2 dimensional world, and not vice versa, but onward to, if you're in a 1 dimensional world, how would you try to explain 2 dimensions? Because, the big thing with explaining 3 dimensions is that when they move upward, they call that north. And so they go upward, not northward. And so upward is like extending into the 3rd dimension, but nobody knows what that means. And they're like, but it makes sense. You go upward, and they're like, north. No, not north, upward. So it's kind of that cognitive functioning reasoning exercise that I could see why Sheldon would like. But for as far as the satire goes, I don't think he would understand or care for any of that.
Sheldon?
Yeah,
like,
Sheldon.
That he wouldn't like pick it up. He wouldn't like. I guess that explains why he never thought of it. Like when Martha mentions it, and then it kind of clicked in after he was told. Like, yeah, you're right. It goes in line with his character that he wouldn't care about that.
That he cares about the specifics and the details of trying to picture things of how could they look like this if things worked systematically. Yeah. So anyways, I read that. If anybody has questions, I don't know if I understood it all, because it's
well, how would you rate it? How many triangles would you give it?
Well, triangles are the lower class. Higher class are circles. So am I giving it triangles or circles?
It's up to you. You're the one that read the book.
I think maybe 2 circles and 1.5 triangles.
Okay. So that's do you recommend rating. It? I guess overall, would you recommend this book?
I would recommend it just to try to picture what Sheldon's thinking. I also, as we try to understand how space-time works, trying to think outside the box and how we need to think outside the box to understand that there is a 4th dimension, that it's not something we visually see or could even comprehend, but it's there nonetheless. So it's I like that challenge of thinking outside the box, and I feel like this is a great starter for that.
Right on.
But if you're looking for I'm glad you a book or like a story, it's not going to be a story. It's not going to be action packed. It's not a page turner. There's no erotic fun to it.
No gratuitous sex scenes in it.
Yeah. Although it does say that houses are built with a large entrance in the front for men and then a small entrance in the back for women. So women always go through the back door, I guess.
Oh. I'll use my imagination.
I think that's a metaphor. I don't know what for, but
all right.
That's it for Flatland.
All right. Let's get started then with the episode. This is Season 3, Episode 13, The Bozeman Reaction. Aired January 18th, 2010. Written by Chuck Lorre, Bill Prady, and teleplay by Stephen Maloro. Directed by Mark Sandrowski. We open and the guys are all out to dinner at a Chinese restaurant. Howard makes note that it's been forever since the 4 of them have gone out. Obviously, it's a call out to him and Leonard having girlfriends. And Raj is very quick to call this out. And of course, he's super jealous. He says that he would kill a hobo if it'll get him laid. So it sounds like he's not really, based off the last couple episodes, it doesn't really sound like he's looking for a girlfriend. I think he just wants a little action.
Mm-hmm.
And Sheldon is ignoring them and only paying attention to the menu. How it's changed. Leonard says, so what? It's the same food. And Sheldon's response is, oh, is it? Look at this. General Tso's chicken is no longer listed under specialties. It's now under chicken. And he goes into the whole spiel of like, what did the chef just lose? Like does he not have faith in his own dishes anymore? What's going on? How can we trust this place?
Or has he lost confidence in himself? Right?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
And then he sees mobster sauce. But obviously it's a typo. But with all the bickering, they're like, screw it. Let's just go get pizza. Let's go to Corleone's. Obviously no mobsters there. And then we jump over to the stairwell, and Sheldon and Leonard are chatting about the restaurant. Sheldon is still stuck on the mobster sauce typo.
I have to say, if I read that, I would assume it was a sauce that mobsters would like. I would assume that it's like a spicy sauce.
A mobster
Dangerous.
Sauce and a Chinese restaurant. Extra spicy, extra chilies. It's Szechuan style. He says, the more I think about it, the mobster sauce couldn't possibly contain chunks of mobster. And why is that? Because it was listed under seafood. And I thought Leonard made a great point. What if there are mobsters who slept with the fishies?
I like that too. I laughed.
And then Sheldon, I love this because like I feel like I'm kind of like this. Because like Sheldon's like kind of having a ridiculous conversation, and he looks over at Leonard and says, "Are we having a serious conversation or not?" And I love having serious conversations about not serious things, like what we're doing with Big Bang Theory.
I don't know. I think Kelsey looks at me sometimes and is like, "Are we having a serious conversation or not?" Like big thing is Taylor Swift. I like some of Taylor Swift's music. Kelsey loves Taylor Swift, but some of her lyrics I just can't take seriously. And she has one about thinking she's in high school now, and I think the line's something like, "Will you marry, kiss, or kill me?" And I've been singing it, "America will kill me." And Kelsey's like, "What the hell are you singing?" And I said, "I'm like, doesn't it sound like America will kill me? Will you marry, kiss, or kill me?" And she just looks at me and like, "You can't possibly be fucking serious right now." So I don't know. I think I'm a little, I don't think I'm as serious as people would like me to be.
Well, we all know that, Brian. A shout out to this old show that I used to listen to. It was a podcast. It was called Movie Fights. And the entire premise was basically this, was that it was a competition about like contestants are posed a question about like something comic booky or something like that. And everybody just takes it so serious. And I don't know if this is one of the questions, but like one of them would be like, oh, who would win in a fight? Captain America or Wolverine? I don't know, something like that. And then they would just debate that, like so serious. And I loved it. But it must have lost funding or something like that because it's not on anymore.
Aww.
I know, it's really sad. I love that show. But anyways, the guys notice that the door has been broken open. They realize they've been robbed. And they quickly notice the missing TVs, the laptops, and then Sheldon just starts to freak. And then he rushes into his room, but everything's okay because they didn't take his comics.
I get a point for being like Sheldon here. In fact, I relate very closely to this episode because when I was in college, somebody got into my apartment and stole a bunch of stuff. And mostly my video games. It's like over Thanksgiving break, so they knew college students are gone and they could have as much time as they want. But I remember going in and looking through my books and finding my rare books. I'm like, they didn't steal my rare books. So yeah, Sheldon. And even when like the cops came, I like went through a list of the video games I stolen. I swear the cops had the same expression, like, I don't fucking care what games, assorted games. So Sheldon.
Yeah, I really sympathize with Sheldon on this, and I don't really think it was fair that he was being painted as the in quote crazy one, the loony one for his reactions, because I was going to mention this later on in the episode, but I'll mention it now. But like with like this is a very normal reaction. to being the victim of a crime.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when the incident happened with my neighbor, we weren't technically the victims. We were just kind of like in the vicinity. But even my wife was like the day after, she just looked me square in the eye and said, "Pack a bag, we're moving." I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, okay." Like, let's take a breath, let's take a beat. And like, and in my early 20s, my room got broken into as well. And just
Mhm.
like, it's just like this icky feeling, like when you're like the victim of something like that, even if like you didn't encounter the person, just knowing that it happened to you is just like, yeah, I
And
do want to just run away and like just start fresh.
if they stole stuff, even if it was like pointless stuff, video games, your underwear, I don't know, like it's that icky feeling. They were in your space, and it feels like you've been not tainted, but
Violated.
violated. Yeah. And I remember talking to somebody before, and like they didn't really get like why I felt so weird about it, and then like they had it happen to them, and it's like, yeah, it feels like they were inside you and not supposed, like it feels violating, even if they're
Yeah.
stealing stuff or not. It's just the fact that they're there and taking advantage of your space, your what you're supposed to be safe in.
Yeah, so the first time I ever watched this, it was kind of like, you're on the audience's side on this, where it's like, okay, Sheldon, you're overreacting, blah, blah, blah. But now that like I've experienced life and now that I've seen this multiple times, it is a little heartbreaking that his friends aren't giving him any sympathy. Because
Yeah,
I don't think he's overreacting. He's reacting very normally to something that would happen like
it's how
this.
people would react. Even like I was in Costa Rica. It's been a few years now for a friend's wedding, and during the ceremony, somebody broke into our Airbnb and stole a bunch of stuff. And it was like the Airbnb was right next door to the venue and like walking distance. So we were walking back and forth, and somebody walked in and like must have scared them off because they didn't take everything they could have. But it was still like for a lot of the night and for weeks to come, people were like, uh, they took a little Bluetooth radio speaker. They took some laptops. One guy I felt really bad for. They stole his he brought a drone to help videography the wedding and take pictures. And they took that. It was like in a huge crate. It was an expensive one with cameras, and they just picked up the whole thing and left. And a lot of the like ceremony pictures were on that, so those were all gone.
Mm.
But it was still about like they were actually in here, and are we supposed to sleep in here now? The weird thing is that I happen to be sleeping in a different place from everybody else. Did I tell you about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I thought so, but so for everybody else, I was like sleeping in a balcony, like on a twin bed that was like for kids that I just happened to find, and like it was a spare place for me to have some privacy. And apparently the thieves never got there. So, well, that and my laptop was like in the middle of the room and out in the open, and they just didn't take it. I don't know why, but and everybody's looking at me like, Ryan, we noticed none of your shit was touched. I'm like, I don't know, really.
Well, your stuff is worthless, actually.
Oh, that's right. I've tainted it just by touching it. And after they took all my video games in college, you're like, ah, shit, we don't want his stuff anymore.
Yeah. We learned the hard way. His stuff is crap.
It's crap. We can't get rid of that. It's like cursed.
Back to the comic book thing, I do like it's supposed to be like a little bit of a joke, like, oh, he values his comics like over his other things and everything. But we have established in an old IQ point that his comics are probably worth more than all of their tech.
That's true. Yeah, that he has some special editions
Like
that
they're
are
worth
worth a fucking penny.
thousands.
Yeah.
Thousands. And we established in an old episode he actually has a safety deposit box dedicated to comics too.
Mm-hmm.
So those probably weren't even like his more expensive ones.
Mm-hmm.
But, they're probably still worth more than his TV and more than, I mean, his laptop probably somewhat priceless because his work was actually saved on there.
Yeah. And that's different now because we usually save to the cloud or a cloud of some sort, but back then that
Yeah.
wasn't a thing, so that would be a problem.
Yeah. Well, his comics are safe, and now we roll credits.
Roll credits. I have to say, for this episode, I like it, but as we get into it more, I remember somebody leaving us a review. Was it a review or an email saying like, it's kind of pointless to really go over the information in the episode because it's all double checked. I think this episode proves that it's worth double checking because they got quite a bit of stuff wrong, and I'm excited to talk about some of this. But I wanted to bring that up before I actually got into some of what I'm like. This really should have been checked.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe if you're still listening to that person who gave us that review, because I know who you're talking about.
It was you, Rob.
Maybe
you did it. You said, this podcast is pointless. Ryan and I should just give up.
What are you doing? Why are you wasting your life?
All right, on to the next
episode. Well, please feel free to readjust your review and give us that 5 stars. Well, the police are listing out their they're with the police and they're listing out their missing items, and it's a lot of video games. Sheldon says they took our TV, 2 laptops, 4 external hard drives, PS2, PS3, Xbox, Xbox 360, classic Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, and their Wii. And then Leonard's like a little awkward about it. He's like, yeah, we like games. And then Sheldon's like, right, games. They took Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, Call of Duty 1, Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty 3, Rock Band, Rock Band 2, Final Fantasy 1 through 9, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, The Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess, Super Mario Brothers Galaxy, Mario, and Sonic at the Winter Olympics, and Miss Pac-Man.
And I get my first IQ point here because he's wrong about Final Fantasy 1 through 9.
Because they're listed out of order? Because technically there is like...
They're out of order, and at that time, unless he was actually importing games and had a Japanese Famicom, he didn't say Famicom, he said Nintendo, he would not have some of these.
Even on PlayStation? I feel like at this time How did I play Final Fantasy IX? Or is it some of the other ones that were only released in Japan?
Some of the only older ones. So we get the ones that I think people know the most, 7, 8, and 9. Those are PlayStation 1. And technically PlayStation 2 was backward compatible. So if they had a PlayStation 2, it would make sense that they were playing that on PlayStation 2. But I'm going to go into a little bit of depth with this. Final Fantasy 1 came out for Famicom, Japanese Nintendo, which was called Family Computer, so Famicom, in 1987. In the US, it came out in 1990. So they could have that in the US, definitely. Now, things get kind of weird because, I've read multiple theories on this, but it was time constraints, deadlines being missed, but... Final Fantasy II didn't come out in the US for quite a while. Final Fantasy III didn't come out in the US for a lot longer. Final Fantasy IV took a while. Basically, the next game we had in the US, the next one, I'm sorry, I think I misspoke on that. The next one we had was Final Fantasy IV, which was released in the US as Final Fantasy II for Super Nintendo. And then Final Fantasy V also was not released in the US till years later. I'm going to get back to that. Final Fantasy VI was released as Final Fantasy III for Super Nintendo in the US. And then we noticed between Super Nintendo and PlayStation, if you were alive in the 90s and paying attention to Final Fantasy, we jumped from Final Fantasy III to Final Fantasy VII. They got us back on track because we had missed out on Final Fantasy II, III, and V. So the thing is, Final Fantasy II originally came out for Famicom in Japan in 1988. In the US, it didn't come out until 2003 as Final Fantasy Origins for PS1. Final Fantasy Origins included Final Fantasy 1 and 2, and they had some updates, I believe, maybe some cutscenes, I don't remember. And then Final Fantasy 5, which for a while was called Final Fantasy 2.5 because it came out between America's 2 and 3, but it was technically 4, 5, 6 in Japan. Uh, Final Fantasy 5 didn't come out till 1998 in what was called Final Fantasy Anthology, and that was for PlayStation as well, and that included Final Fantasy 6, which was America's Final Fantasy. So they could have, so far, they could have these games, assuming that they were buying them for PlayStation and not Super Nintendo and regular Nintendo. Um, Maybe they had the original Final Fantasy for Nintendo, but other than that, yeah, things are getting kind of weird, and they didn't really say that. The real issue is Final Fantasy 3 in Japan's Final Fantasy 3. This came out on Famicom, Japan's Nintendo, in 1990. It wasn't released in the US until it came out in 2006 on the DS as a three-dimensional remake. Now, here's the kicker. It wasn't until 2021 that the original was finally released in the US on computers and phones, and it wasn't until 2023 that it was released on Switch and PS4. So Final Fantasy 3, unless he was talking about the DS version, he didn't mention DS as a system, so I'm assuming that's not in there, and therefore is null and void. Also, I don't think he would count Final Fantasy 3, like it was kind of a gimmicky three-dimensional remake for the DS. I don't think he would count that. So technically, he doesn't have Final Fantasy 1 through 9. I don't know what exactly he would have, but at that time, it would be impossible for him to have Final Fantasy 3 unless he was talking about the DS remake, which seems like he didn't. Or unless he was importing stuff from Japan, but I don't think that's in Sheldon's character.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Do you know what the difference was between the American Nintendo and the Japanese one, the Famicom?
It looked
Were they not
different.
compatible? Were they not like
As far as
the
I know,
cartridges weren't compatible?
that's actually, now that you mention, I think the cartridges actually looked different. I know Super Nintendo cartridges look different, and
Okay.
technically could not. I don't
So
think
even if he would have to buy the Japanese Famicom,
yeah, he would have to have a
play it.
Japanese
Okay.
console, and
Okay.
with that, I think also they had restrictions on them. It's like Blu-rays. If you get I hate this because I like to watch foreign movies, and if I get a Blu-ray from England, or bigger yet, America's really lagging behind on physical releases. People love digital, even though digital has flaws. For instance, audio quality is crap on digital. They're saying, "Oh, it's Dolby Audio," but that really means nothing. It's still like slightly better than DVD quality. If you are streaming movies, like you don't even get Blu-ray quality audio. So if you want a movie and you want the best possible picture and sound, you have to buy physical, and you have to go to a different country usually to buy this physical copy. Problem is, Blu-rays and DVDs don't play on American DVD and Blu-ray players. For 4K, I don't know why, but they dropped that. So 4K seems UHDs seem to be universal. But the same was true with Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and PlayStation. I believe that was a big thing with PlayStation, that everyone was like, "Oh, if it's a CD, how do we get to restrict regions so that people can't just buy Japanese stuff and play it in America?" And PlayStation did it by, there was a whole thing that I can't remember what it was. I watched the whole video, but they had some secret technique to read a part of the disc before it even started playing the game. And so if you ever like played imports or worked with mod chips, like you would get to like one screen and you had to wait. And if it actually worked and the mod chip was working, like it would go to the next screen, and you could tell that it bypassed the security protocol and you were getting to play the imports.
I had no idea.
Oh, I loved that stuff when I was in high school. I had a friend who was from Japan, so he was bringing all these Japanese games. I'm like, they look amazing. I need to play them.
Well, I actually going back to your sound quality thing, I actually was scrolling through Instagram, and a little tip to everyone. I didn't even know this. I just came across it like this morning, actually. Um, Apparently, like most people don't have surround sound. Like
Mm,
that's, so then apparently Netflix's default audio settings is like Dolby 5.1 or
yeah.
something like that. So it assumes you have a surround sound. So you need to switch it off of that 5.1 onto like normal audio, and then all of a sudden it comes out of your TV like smoother.
Yep. It's higher quality too. That when it's
You'll actually
out,
hear everything.
yeah, yeah. When it's
Like if
going
you
to,
ever notice, like when you're just watching it on the TV, when people are whispering, they're actually whispering and you can't hear anything that they're saying. It's because it assumes you're going to be picking it up in your surround sound.
it's cutting off chunks from the higher ends and lower ends and like making it kind of, what's the word? Not mumbling, but more like it's being talked through a tin can type thing. Like really,
Yeah.
yeah, muffled. That's the word I'm looking for. Muffled almost. And even if you can understand it, like if you have a quality speaker and you put like, I know Kelsey, she doesn't give a crap about audio quality. I care a lot about it,
Such a shame.
and
Such a
right,
shame.
and she's like, I don't know
Yeah,
why
we
you
had a
even
whole
bother
deep
about
dive
this.
into like what Dolby versus
DTS,
shoot. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and I forced Kelsey to listen to a Blu-ray compared to like just streaming, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I definitely hear a difference." I'm like, "Right, that's why I do it." And she's like, "I still don't care." I'm like, "What the hell?"
Oh.
And for the most part, you're paying like the same amount for the digital copy versus a physical copy. So why pay the same for when you're getting shit? Like they're like, here's some shit, give us the same amount of money, and I get pissed off about that. I
Good
feel
sound is like,
things.
yeah. It's kind of like I'm sure all headphones have this now, but like noise canceling. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, it's so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember it's funny because Christina got me these for my birthday last year, and then she didn't really know what the big deal was. She just like knew that it was like the next great thing. So she got them for me, and I was like always listening or using them and listening to them, and like I always utilized the noise canceling, and she would always try to talk to me and I would never pay attention because I couldn't hear anything. And she was like, is it really that great? Is it really that amazing? And I just picked it up and put it on her, played the song, and she was like,
It's like you see her
oh
pupils
my God.
dilate, like,
Yeah.
wow.
Like, wow.
I could say too with the talk between Dolby Atmos. So they're really,
Yeah, we
really
actually talked.
pushing.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
with
that was part of that IQ point too.
DTS that it's they're and like I've noticed it more and more. They're like, well, it's Dolby Atmos. I'm like, that really doesn't mean anything. Like, it doesn't actually say the quality or the bit rate or like, yeah, any of it is up to standards. Like, it's going to sound good, and like you're going to see instruments like picked out, but man, it doesn't mean that it's quality. It doesn't mean like you said, you might still see muffled voices, right, and clips off stuff. It's really over processed. I don't know. I like quality audio, and if I'm going to pay money for it, I want to know it's the best.
Mhm. Well, all right.
All
Anything
right.
else on Final Fantasy or sound? I don't know how we segued into
That's what
sound,
I was
but
just thinking. It was me. I just sneaked us into a sound
any way to
conversation.
sneak it in.
Yeah. It's like you with food. It's like
Yeah.
food, audio. What the hell is this podcast about even?
Obviously, it's about food and audio. So ASMR.
ASMR, yes.
Mukbang. Well, the policeman just chalks everything up to assorted video games. And guest star alert: the policeman is Officer Hackett is played by Julio Oscar Nacoso, who actually recently passed away in 2017. He actually had a very long list of acting jobs. He was best known for Jurassic Park 3, Planet Terror, and he had just a series of small roles. Law and Order, Grey's Anatomy, things like that. And I kind of thought the whole thing was funny on their list of video games because I totally thought that they would have more games.
That
Either that or just
yeah.
not all of them were stolen.
And digital games weren't a big thing at the time, and I was kind of wondering, like, maybe they had digital games, but I think physical games were still
Yeah.
pretty substantial at that time. So I thought that was kind of weird.
But I'm sure
Yeah.
they didn't have like all the time in the world. It's a 20-minute episode, so they couldn't list off every game
Every,
imaginable. But
and I also noticed that Sheldon kept saying classic Nintendo, and I've never heard anybody say classic Nintendo. I hear Nintendo or NES, and mostly it's NES for Nintendo Entertainment System, and for Super Nintendo it's SNES. But
or shorthanded to like super.
yeah, but I've never heard anybody say classic.
Yeah. I think they're just trying to establish to the non-gaming folk
That's
that it's the original.
yeah, I think that's exactly what it is, but it seemed out of character to make that happen. So be more
Well, Sheldon,
realistic.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sheldon is pushing for police action. He preps some evidence as he found a soda can the robbers drank from, and he supplies his own prints to be ruled out as a suspect, but not Leonard's. It could be an inside job. And then we get another I'm not crazy. My mother had me tested.
I like that line.
Well, the police begin to leave, but Sheldon tells him about the work on his computer, that he has 4 of the 5 Gedenken experiments necessary for a cogent restatement of the quantum measurement problem. And this is relevant because if this scientific work gets published in the next couple of months, they can track down his laptop.
So I have
And
2 IQ points here.
lay it
One
on me.
is when Howard Leonard asks the cop if it's out of line to just shoot Sheldon, and the cop says he can put him on a 72-hour psychiatric hold. And I was curious if that's true. And from my research in California, it is true. I went to Harvard Law, harvard.edu, an article by Leslie Allen, and it stated that in 47 states, police can take a person to custody without a warrant and initiate a psych hold. So each state is a little bit different. Most jurisdictions allow police to take them and if to get help if they're posing a threat to themselves or somebody else. So I guess that's the rationale that police get this power because it helps prevent harm from the person or others. Apparently, in 38 states, the police can initiate a short-term emergency commitment process. So they're like kind of the first step in the emergency plan, I guess, to what to do with this person. But again, not every single state. This article,
But
also,
I don't think they would be able to just do it for the sake of doing it. It's just like finding evidence. They would, I would imagine, have to have some sort of probable cause.
they probably would have to explain why they are doing it, but it seems like they get a lot of leeway with it, from what I was seeing. So, if they're putting everybody in 72-hour holds that they see, it's probably questionable. But, I think they get quite a bit of leeway, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Although I'd be curious of learning more how that works exactly. And then I learned from a website called namisanticarla.org that the code that allows this in California is a 5150. It's what allows a 72-hour hold, and it's basically designated by a professional personnel, which includes police, but also could be a mobile crisis team or other mental health professional. And it seemed like everybody's kind of trained on this, so it's not just like they're given the power and like have fun, but it's some medical training to understand what is the issue going on and how to respond to it. So I felt kind of good about that. That's not just like a abuse of power or something that isn't trained. It seemed like there is some training involved, but yeah, I was always curious how that's handled and if police actually have that power. And apparently in California they do, but not in every single state.
What are you said it was like 47 states? What are the 3 states that don't allow it?
I didn't see. I did notice that Washington allowed police some power like that as well.
What about in Pennsylvania?
I didn't check Pennsylvania. I'm guessing so. I would.
I can't call this an IQ point.
Oh
no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Delete.
Show canceled.
Canceled. Okay, let's start that audio podcast.
All right.
So, my other IQ point was to talk a little bit about the theft of intellectual property. And I felt weird about this because everybody kind of laughs at Sheldon where he's like, they might steal my publications. And everyone's like, yeah, that's going to happen. But it does actually happen.
Yeah, we actually talked about this during the maternal congruence. It was the dispute between Newton's claim that he invented calculus versus Gottfried Leibniz. They discovered it at the same time, and he actually had a better form of calculus.
Version. Yeah.
So these days, we're actually using Leibniz's version of calculus, and Isaac Newton set Britain back decades.
Take that, Britain.
Yeah, fuck it.
If you're listening from Britain,
Suck
we
it.
love you. Please keep listening. But yeah, so this does happen. I don't get why they made it such a joke. Like, I don't think that's what they're actually doing, but these thieves. But I actually found a website called from the University of Copenhagen, an article by Mike Young, and it was like a list. It was like 120 testimonials of people who've had their work stolen. Granted, that seemed like the majority of that work was people they knew who would come in and like learn about it and then like put their name on it. Or somebody is like, oh, can I help with a part? And they do, and they say, you have to put my name on it. Or like they learn a little bit about it and then like do the whole project before the other person gets it published. Or quite a few times it seemed like instructors were like on PhD candidates would like poo-poo on the ideas and say, oh, that doesn't make sense. Don't do that. That's stupid. Why would you do that? And then get it published themselves.
It's fucked up.
Right? A lot of that. And I know that like in the past, women have had a huge issue with this where men were like, oh, you're a woman. You can't get this published. I'll just take all the credit for it. And they got away with it because they were men. So it happens. It happens. Then I found a website, U.S. Government Accountability Office, says that, although it can happen domestically, we have a big issue with foreign adversaries trying to steal work too. But again, it's usually through collaborations where somebody from a foreign country is like, oh, I'll help with that. And then they steal the work, get it published, get money, get grants. That's a big thing too, is like if you're doing research and you're spending all this time and you want a grant to finish the research and somebody grabs that up before you can, that ruins your life, right? So they say in that website, they say, be careful who you're working with. Don't like work with just anybody. Don't, in fact, if you can avoid it, don't work with anyone. But like be extra cautious of that. Don't just take things for granted. Really, really build relationships. And yeah, because it could be intellectual theft. And I found some other websites because what this got me thinking about is corporate and industrial espionage. Basically, companies trying to steal information from each other, get those patented ideas and formulas and recipes. It's like Coca-Cola is kept under like lock and key, right? Nobody knows any of the ingredients in KFC's chicken except the Colonel, and he's dead, right? I don't know if that's true, but you know what I mean.
Well, somebody must know.
They've been making up since the day he died. And according to these
No,
websites,
Colonel Sanders actually made enough spice kits to last an eternity before he died. It's actually what killed him.
I will make sure these spice kits last until the end of time. You can buy them; they're like good as gold. But apparently, other websites say industrial espionage, corporate or espionage, personal computers being stolen is a huge thing because you steal somebody's computer, you look through their emails, and you might get glimpses of what they're doing, how they're doing stuff, and start stealing their ideas or competing with them more efficiently because you have the intel, the inside scoop. So, yeah, as far as this goes, I don't really know what he was researching, but absolutely, if this was something that was valuable or worth money, people would go through that length to steal his laptop. It reminds me of so turning this back into a crime broadcast, but do you know who Sandusky was from Penn State?
Maybe remind me.
He was an assistant coach for Joe Paterno, Joe Pa.
Uh-huh.
So back in like the early 2000s, 90s.
Oh, he took his plays?
No. He was an assistant coach, and he got in trouble for molesting minors in the shower room, basically, if I remember correctly. And I was going at Penn State at the time, but I really don't care about sports, so as much as I know about this, it's very little. But if I remember correctly, they basically tore down all of Joe Paterno's statues, and even though it was Sandusky who was convicted, they basically blamed it on the school. They took away a bunch of their winnings and like trophies and stuff. They took down Joe Pa's statue, and the guy was like really, really old. And as soon as this all went to town, he got sick and like died a few days later. It was almost like the turmoil killed him. But anyways, there was I can't remember what his job title was, but there was a guy who was like a DA. Is that right? No. Investigating, and he turned up. He like disappeared for a while, and then he turned up dead in his car by a river, and his laptop was like found, and the hard drive was taken out and disappeared, and it was ruled a suicide. And it's like, wait, he was investigating this huge scandal that would go down years later. He's found dead. His computer is found and the hard drive's taken out. And it's a suicide and it's just random. Like, everybody's like, I don't think so. So anyways,
I don't want to put a target on our back, but look what's happened with Boeing right now.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to tell me that computers being stolen for information like that? It happens, and I bet they make it look like a burglary when they do steal it, because if it's just for the laptop, everybody knows what it's about. But throw a few video games in there too, and it's like, oh, it must just be people stealing video games. But
well, and to turn this into a food podcast,
food time.
Well, the whole there was actually in this last season of Top Chef, there was a controversy that one of the chefs or one of the contestants made a dish as one of their projects, and it was apparently completely copied from a restaurant where they worked out of. But that kind of goes into like the whole thing of like, can you really copy food? Is like, can you really copyright food and everything like that? If it's a recipe, if you work at a restaurant and you make it, it just goes into your brain.
That's tough. It's like music, right? That so many songs have the same 4 chords, but if you play them just right, like you can get sued for using those 4 chords, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. If it's I say prosecute, throw him in jail. He stole the food.
Yeah. Kill him.
All right. So that's all for that IQ point.
Dang, we're like an hour into this, and like we're only on like the second scene.
I don't have many more IQ points, so I just
I do.
You do. Dun, dun,
dun. Well, now the police leave and they're left alone with just their thoughts, and all they could do is watch TV on their phones and wait for the criminals to return to bludgeon them to death in their sleep.
I was curious too. The cop's partner was Bocho, and for some reason, when the cop left, he says something like, "Let's go, Baco," or whatever his name is, and they have a laugh track. And I'm like, what was
Oh, I didn't
funny
even
about
notice
that?
that.
Uh,
I think it's more. I thought it was more of like they're leaving. Like you're on your own.
Maybe that's what it was.
We're
But
out. Yeah.
like, I want you to watch it again and let me know. I'm going to watch it again too because I actually
I'll have to watch
paused
it
and
again.
rewound it. I'm like, it just seems like an out of place laugh track. Like, up, we're going. Like, he's like, all right, bye. And it's laugh track. And he's like, come on, Boko. And then, ha 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 ha. I'm like, what?
Like there's nothing funny about this at all.
Yeah. And so, like, I was curious if, like, maybe I didn't recognize the actor or the sidekick. I don't know. If anybody has information on that, I would be,
Yeah.
it might just be weird editing or it might just be crazy Ryan. I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I hear a laugh track now.
Yeah, it's laugh track.
Well, I'm going to dive into an IQ point.
All right.
So Sheldon says that, oh, we're just going to have to sit here and wait for the robbers to come back and murder us. So it got me wondering. I was like, well, what's the chances that they would even come back? So IQ point, how often do criminals return to the scene of the crime? So I was specifically looking into burglaries just because like that's kind of what this is about. So I didn't want to look into other things. So I found this on BrentonSecurity.com, Brinks.com, and CalderSecurity.com. And before any of you viewers out there send us an email, I am very aware that these are all security websites, so there is possibly some bias in this. But it was, aside these websites, the government really doesn't talk about the return to the scene of the crime. They really only look at statistics, which we will get into later. But all of these sites also had like murders and more heinous crimes. But like I said, I wanted to focus on just burglaries.
I was going to say, I've heard that with
oh.
murders, the murderer almost always comes back to the scene of the crime, especially with like serial killers. They come in and like they'll offer help or like yeah.
Well, it's because they get a special feeling from the murder. So when they return to the scene, they get that feeling again.
And they see everybody like taking action. They're like, ooh, this is all because it's
yeah, they kind of get off on it.
Yeah. But I'm not sure we can compare that to all other crimes like theft and robbery but maybe.
Well, maybe we can.
Yeah,
because the answer is yes.
Yes.
Repeat burglaries are actually very common. If your home is broken into, whether it's a failed attempt or a successful attempt, there is a 50% chance it will happen again within 1 to 6 months. And I looked into why this happens. First reason, the robber will know the layout of your home and possible other security flaws. Sometimes they'll take a spare key or leave unchecked windows unlocked for easier access in the future. Or they just let their guard down and the victims assume it'll never happen again. Next one is the robbers scoped out your home and was not able to take everything that they wanted. So they made note of the things that they wanted in the future. So they come back for it. Yeah, exactly. Or the most likely is that they're colossal fucking assholes and they wait for your valuables to be replaced through insurance. And then they strike again and they take it all again. And then the last reason is because if it's a failed attempt, the criminal will just want to redeem themselves and come back with the right tools. So this is our episodic PSA. Update your security, everyone. Be safe out there.
I'm going to move right into the next IQ point with this because we have already discussed this, and I think it's really important. but through the episode, they keep saying it's a robbery and that these were robbers. They are
But it's
wrong.
burglar.
It's
Yeah,
burglary.
robbery is assaults, right?
Yep, robbery is done with violence. So you can look this up. But Shao's California Law Group says that in the state of California, robbery is stealing property through force or fear. It does not involve entering a premise. It can, but does not always. It requires a victim's presence. Must have stolen property, but the key is that it needs force or fear, which makes it a violent crime. Burglary, on the other hand, technically burglary isn't even theft. It is breaking into a premise with the intention to commit a crime, usually theft, but I guess it could be breaking and entering to vandalize as well. We just don't hear it like that as much. May and apparently in some cases it may require someone to be in the dwelling at the time for it to be a burglary. So different places have different legal definitions. May not have property stolen. Does not need force or fear. It's so this is where it's happening without you knowing, which is they were at dinner when this happened. It's not a violent crime. It is a property crime. Violent crimes are always felonies from this article. Property crimes are usually felonies. And then theft is just taking somebody else's property without consent. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you've entered the premises unlawfully. So like shoplifting is theft. Pickpocketing is theft. But yeah, so these kind of combine where you get theft with robbery, you get theft with burglary. But from this website, apparently, oftentimes defenders will try to talk down burglaries into just like theft or like shoplifting or whatever to make it not a felony or talk down the crimes. But again, I don't know why they kept saying robbers, because there was no violence. They never saw the perpetrators. It was just a complete inaccuracy in the terminology. So IQ point that made up for the last one.
Zoom, zoom. Well, now we go to the next scene. We're finally on scene 3. Hour into the show. Shit.
It'll get better.
Hopefully you're all still listening.
Yeah.
Well, Sheldon is restless and checks his door to make sure it's locked. And then he panics and moves his drawer in front of the door. And then he hops back in bed and tells himself he does not have to pee. And crap. I am the master of my own bladder. Drat.
We learned through this episode he is not the master of his bladder.
No, he is not. Well, now we cut over to Penny's apartment, and Penny is with Leonard, and she's kind of reflecting on the situation, and she says that if she hadn't been working the dinner shift, she would have probably physically run into the robbers or burglars or thieves, not robbers, technically.
Not robbers. Unless they attacked her, then that could be robbery, but...
Well, she would have gone Nebraska on their asses.
Yeah.
And I love this showing of like tough Penny, which they kind of show like throughout the entire like series, that she's not the damsel. And I love that about Penny. And then they get a knock from Sheldon to Leonard and Penny. And then Penny answers the door, and Sheldon gets pretty judgy that a crime just happened and she shouldn't just be opening the door without asking who it is. And I love that setup. Because it won't happen again.
And it doesn't.
And nope. Well, Sheldon, obviously scared to be alone, is checking in on them. And then he leaves, and then he knocks again, and then Penny learned, and she asks, "Who is it?" And then Sheldon re-enters, and he just won't leave them alone. It's very obvious that he just wants to stay with the pack. Penny asks if he wants to sleep there tonight, but Sheldon, I love this, he's like, "Oh, no, thanks. The two of them wouldn't be comfortable on the couch, even with Leonard's small stature. He just assumes that he would take her bed.
Yeah, like last time, right?
Yep. And then Sheldon just straight up admits he's scared to be alone. And so they all hang out and they go back over to their apartment.
I get 1 point for being like Sheldon here because Leonard says, why do you want company? You don't like other people. And Sheldon says, well, he does tonight. And I can understand that conflict of not liking other people, but also wanting company. And it's like a dichotomy.
Is that how you feel about me?
Yes.
You don't like me, but you want my company.
I want to get off this podcast, but I love your face.
You mean this face?
Yeah.
Well, now they're playing Pictionary, and Leonard is asleep, but Penny is being a good sport, and she's still playing, and she's guessing his clues. She guesses 3 little kittens, 3 little pigs. Is it Star Wars? And then it buzzes, and Leonard wakes up. He's like, oh, did we win? Can we go to bed? And Sheldon just like flips out. I could not have made this easier. Hydrogen atom, H, plus pigs minus P, Higgs, Bo, General Zod trapped in the Phantom Zone, Bozone, Pair, Tickle, Paraticle, Higgs, Boson, Particle. How could you not get that? It's actually pretty good, Pictionary.
For that level of a phrase, yeah, but paraticle, I would be so thrown off by paraticle.
Paraticle.
Why would you tickle a pear?
Well, Sheldon finally lets them go to sleep, and he volunteers to take first watch. And their watch is going to begin at 0400. And then Leonard has to break the news to Penny that that's 45 minutes.
He says, just keep walking.
Yeah. Well, they scurry off as fast as possible, and Sheldon decides to check the door, and then he pulls out his phone to watch TV, which is a colossal mistake, because it sounds like he just happens to turn on a slasher film, which I tried to look into if this was a real movie.
Oh. It didn't sound
I don't
real
think
to
it
me.
is.
Like it
I don't think it is. I think it was just a voiceover. You were going to say something?
Oh, I get 1 point for being like Sheldon because he puts a door or a chair in front of the door to keep the intruders out. And I don't think I've ever done, maybe I have done it for intruders, but I know on cruises, I've put chairs in front of the balcony because I'm like always super nervous that I haven't walked since I was like 10 years old. But I'm like, what if I sleepwalk and just walk out the balcony door and over the end of the boat and die? I'm like,
oh my God.
I don't want to do that. So I put a chair in front of it. Yeah. So I get his mentality there.
Yep.
Anxiety is a bitch.
Well, Sheldon calmly turns off his phone, walks over to Leonard's room, and then just starts screaming in panic. And I just like who is it? When now we're in the hallway, and all the guys are there. Howard and Raj join them, and they're setting up a security system. And sounds like they thought of everything. It has a titanium deadbolt, reinforced jam controlled by a state-of-the-art electronic access system with a 200-watt uninterruptible backup power supply. It requires independent voice and fingerprint scanners. And then Sheldon paints a picture. What if the robbers kidnap me, force me to record my voice, and then cut off my thumbs? And Leonard says that he'll send them a gift basket. And now we're inside. There are motion detectors, infrared sensors, and cameras connected to a server running state-of-the-art facial recognition software. And wow, Howard, where did you get all this? The Department of Defense, which apparently has terrible security.
I think that was my favorite part of the episode. And Leonard's like, he gave you that? He goes, he would have if I asked. You know what? They have terrible security. So like, what the hell was he doing? He just like walked in and stole their shit.
We'll enter Penny, and the net drops down on her. And Sheldon is not impressed with this. But Howard plans on making it electric. Which is better.
Picture on the floor spasming uncontrollably. Somehow that coming out of Howard's mouth seemed wrong.
Yeah.
like he meant it like as defense, but still out of his mouth, I was like, whoa there, Howard.
Well, Sheldon is logging his thoughts, and then he hears a noise. He panics. He can't go out the door because, like, what if there's a robber? What if there's a burglar? So he goes out the window onto the ledge. And again, he is the master of his own bladder. We cut to Leonard and Penny getting a little intimate, and then Sheldon has to knock on the window. They let him in, and we find out that the noise was a knocked over lamp. And then it clicks into Sheldon finally what they were doing. He tries to leave out the window, but then they let him out the door. He tries to prolong his exit by offering to make warm milk, but then he finally leaves, and then bam! Electrified. And Sheldon is no longer the master of his own bladder.
Yeah, let's go. Do I have to be the jackass who says it's kind of weird that Leonard gets up to open up the window? Like, if they're getting hot and frisky...
Would you have just left him out there?
I don't know. Maybe put on a robe. I feel like something might be a little exposed.
Little Leonard?
Little Leonard. I feel like if little Leonard wasn't at full mast by that point, something's going wrong.
Well, I was going to say, like, it's weird. Like, the moment that Sheldon leaves the room, they pick up where they left off. I think that would have been the biggest, like, mood killer. Like, I think I'm just going to go to bed now.
I think it's bedtime. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, let's just go to bed.
So that was kind of, but you know what? Good for them. They know what works for them. I don't know what it is, but their
sexual chemistry has been on point.
Yeah. Which reminds me, I just watched, or rewatched the episode of How I Met Your Mother with the Slutty Pumpkin.
Yeah.
And it's where
the first one or the... Oh, in like the later season, yeah.
Yeah. Where he actually dates her, and it's, what's her name? Joey from Dawson's Creek. Katie Holmes. Yeah. He's like, so yeah, I made eye contact with her during sex, and that was awkward. So I looked away, and that was awkward. Where do you look during sex? Like, everything is just weird. I like that. But whatever works with Leonard and Penny.
Yeah. Well, now Sheldon got his new computer, and he's playing around with it. And I've actually found this very identifiable, where he says, my new computer came with Windows 7. Windows 7 is much more user-friendly than Windows Vista. I don't like that. And I identify with that because I do remember it was weird. It was I had an iPhone early on, and then I decided to switch to Android. And then I switched back to iPhone, and iPhone is significantly more user-friendly than Android's. And I hated it. I was like, why? Like, what is all this stuff? Why are you automating everything for me? I don't want that.
I think that's a big part of user friendliness is it limits you and automates shit.
Yeah, so, which I don't like.
Yeah, like it's, I've gotten used to it, but I know going back and forth, the limitations can be a nuisance.
Well, Sheldon is researching a new city to move to, and he must be heavily in distraught because Penny sits in his spot and he does not say anything. And then Leonard says, don't you think looking for a new city is a bit of an overreaction? Which we kind of talked about this earlier in this episode. Like, it's really not.
Yeah.
It is, but it isn't at the same time.
Maybe city, but new place to live. Like, I would probably...
A new state, Yeah, moving across the country because of an incident like this. Okay, maybe that's an overreaction.
But saying I don't feel comfortable in this apartment anymore, I don't think that's completely unlikely, especially if it's an apartment where it's rent. If it's a house, that's a big thing about haunted house stories is that people are like, why don't they just leave the haunted house? And it's like, well, if you own a house and you have a mortgage, like you can't just sell it and you're also invested. But if it's an apartment, it's easy enough to get up and leave an apartment.
Yeah. Well, Sheldon justifies this by saying, our apartment was broken into. Our security system tried to kill me. And as a result, I'm leaving Pasadena forever. How is that overreacting? And then we find out the university is thrilled that he's going to telecommute. So in his search, he looks at Enid, Oklahoma, and Boone, North Carolina. And then he asks Penny about where she grew up, Nebraska. She was born and raised, so he just axes off the whole thing. And this is where I went into that research point, which I told you before we started, that it turned into a little bit of last-minute homework that I was working on even this morning. I deciphered his map.
Oh, wow. I'm curious about this because I did an IQ point on the places he was looking at, and from my research, they are not safe areas. So I'm curious about.
I will say things could have changed in the last. This was 2010, so 14 years.
Yeah.
So things could have changed. Because after this, I actually am going to go into an IQ point about the safest cities and how to crime rates in general and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But I won't. So I did a dive on this, but honestly, I decided I'm not going to call this an official IQ point because I honestly don't know what city he was trying to circle in a lot of cases because the circles were so large. They're so bold. When you look at a map, just that little space right there on the map, it could have been anything. It could have been any city. So I tried to do the closest major city in that proximity.
That's fair.
So starting on the west side, we'll say, I'm just going to shout out Washington because we're both from Washington, or you're in Washington, I'm from there. He didn't actually say anything. He actually didn't write anything. No circle. All right. I'm going through all 50 states, so I'm going to try to go through this fast in case anybody gets bored on this. And like I said, I tried to go with the closest major city, or at least one thing that I zoomed into it, and it was this was actually this shockingly took a long time.
I bet it did.
So I'm good.
That's those they look like small dots, but that's a lot of area that could be multiple cities, and trying to track down where you think it is. Yeah.
It was a lot of zooming in on Google Maps, and Google Maps kind of sucks because its borders between states is not very good. So I couldn't even see where the border was. So I kept having to zoom out and zoom back in.
Yeah.
So pain in the ass, but because it was such a pain in the ass, I'm going to take the time to go over it.
And you all have to listen.
And you will listen. You will not forward through this. But I'm going to try to speed read this because it's going to take a while. All right. Starting going west to east. Oregon. X'd off Baker City and Grants Pass. Nevada. X'd off Reno. Circled somewhere in the area of Las Vegas. Nothing in Idaho. Utah. X'd off Provo. Arizona. X'd off Dateland. Maybe Prescott, but the X seems a little higher than the last X. Oh, and the last X is the whole Navajo Nation. Montana, X off Missoula, X off possibly Townsend. Circled Bozeman, X'd Glendive. Wyoming, X'd off. I had to really zoom into this one. Possibly Opal, maybe Wright. Colorado, X'd off Denver. Maybe Gunnison. New Mexico, X'd off most likely Santa Fe. Didn't look like it was Albuquerque. Then on the lower one, He X'd off Alamogordo. Kansas, X the dead center of the state, maybe Lions. Oklahoma, X off Enid, as we witnessed. Texas, circled what looks like Lubbock, X'd off Odessa, X'd off Dallas, and Houston. Minnesota, X'd off Thief Rivers Falls, which I was wondering if that was an intentional joke. Thief Rivers. Maybe Rochester on the other one in Minnesota. Missouri, X'd off Columbia. Arkansas, X'd off Conway. Louisiana, X'd off Lafayette. Nebraska, whole state. Mississippi, circle Jackson. Michigan, X'd off Sheboygan and Houghton. Illinois, X'd off what... It was definitely in the Chicago area, which was shocking because it's like Chicago is not safe.
It's not known for being safe, that's true.
Nope. Kentucky, Danville. Alabama, X'd Birmingham. Georgia, X'd off Jacksonville. South Carolina, I'm going to guess Lake City and Greenwood. North Carolina, X'd off Boone, as we witnessed, and circled Goldsboro. Virginia, X'd off Richmond. Pennsylvania, X'd off Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. That didn't make sense. West Virginia, X'd off Somerville. New York, X'd off Juanita. New Hampshire, X'd off Manchester. Maine, X'd off Rangeley. Florida, X'd off possibly Fort Myers. And he straight up skipped a series of states. He skipped Washington, California, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Tennessee, Delaware, Maryland, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C., and not showing Alaska and Hawaii.
Makes sense.
Counted
California
them,
because he's
50,
California,
50 states.
Right? It's like, I don't want to be in
did
California.
all 50 states. Yeah. Some of these didn't even make sense. It was like, why would you even consider that?
Yeah.
But, yep, that was that. So now I will go into a real IQ point, which, because of this, based on his map, I wanted to know what are the safest cities in the United States and what is Pasadena's crime rate. So I found this on usnews.com. And like we said before, this episode was in 2010. We can't really track back that information because it's just kind of purged off the internet. So, top 10 safest cities as of 2024. Number 10, Scottsdale, Arizona. Number 9, Burlington, Vermont. 8, Yonkers, New York. 7, Casper, Wyoming. 6, Portland, Maine. 5, Warwick, Rhode Island. 4, Gilbert, Arizona. 3, South Burlington, Vermont. 2, Columbia, Maryland. And the safest city in the United States, Nashua, New Hampshire.
I got different safe cities for the top 3. I only went into the top 3.
What'd you get?
Ridgefield, Connecticut for number 1, Franklin, Massachusetts for number 2, and Lake in the Hills, Illinois for number 3.
And this kind of goes into something that I was going to bring up later as I go into crime rates. All this information is based off different data.
Yeah. And it's also really hard because if you have a big city with a denser population, it's harder to compare to like a city in rural Nebraska or Dakota or whatever. So like hearing these cities, Ridgefield, Franklin, Lake in the Hills, like I've never even heard of Lake in the Hills, Illinois. That sounds like a little small town with like maybe 5 people in it. I don't know.
That's why it's safe. 0 crime every year.
0 crime. It's like the only person who lives there is the sheriff.
Yeah. Well, I will say on my list, I'm shouting this out because I know you're watching for the first time The Office. 2 of the cities are name dropped in The Office pretty often. Yonkers and Nashua.
I think I remember them saying Yonkers before, but I'll keep an eye out for Nashua.
Well, let's talk Pasadena. How
Pasadena.
safe is Pasadena? As of 2024, again, all the statistics are broken down by category. There's violent, non-violent, robbery, burglary, etc.
What site
But
did
in
you use for your source?
um, getnux.org,
I got neighborhoodscout.com.
yeah, I use Neighborhood Scout for something else later
Uh,
on.
interesting.
And like I said, like it was so hard to like sort between all these different sites because each one of them had their own ranking system or had their
Yeah.
own way of scoring. It's kind of odd that there's no universal way to score a crime.
Yeah. Well, maybe if we did it in circles, squares, and triangles.
That's it. Triangles, lower class. They must be criminals.
Yes.
Well, what I found is in a very large nutshell, overall crime in Pasadena Pasadena.
Pasadena.
Overall crime in 2024 is down compared to 2019 and 2020. But the number of crimes per 1,000 residents is 37.9, which is higher than the state average of 23.8. But Pasadena's crime rate is 1.55 times the national average. So overall, Pasadena right now not super safe.
It's not super bad. It's just not super safe.
Anything to add to that? Otherwise, I have one last thing.
Neighborhood Scout said, and I think this is from 2023, but they had it at 27 crimes per 1,000. So you're right that it's just different websites are going to have different information because there's no universal standard.
Well, just for funsies, I decided to look at the exact opposite of this and what are the top 5 most dangerous cities in the United States. Well, I found this on sciencefocus.com. Number 5, Kansas City, Missouri. Number 4, Memphis, Tennessee.
Ooh.
Number 3, Baltimore, Maryland. 2, Detroit, Michigan. Number 1, St. Louis, Missouri. And I actually found that same state on multiple sites. Which I was a little shocked that Compton wasn't on this list. Unless they've been really doing a good job cleaning it up.
Yeah, and again, I'm curious, like, what type of crimes are we comparing? Like, are they just everything? Like jaywalking?
Well, I guess that's where it gets a little hard because it's like, how do you, like, it can't just be one for one.
Yeah.
Like, like rape is not the same thing as theft. And everything like that. You can't really count that. And you can't just count all the crimes and just use that as a statistic. So each state has its own like grading system based on the crime. So getting a whole picture of it is very challenging to do. But that's all I had. That was the very long IQ point.
Interesting. I have a lot of family from St. Louis. I won't be visiting them anytime soon.
You should ask them. You should ask them if they've been noticing any crimes.
They'll be like, we've been committing all these crimes. We're finally getting credit. We're number 1.
Yeah, I helped raise that statistic.
Actually, I think some of them are cops. So I don't know.
Oh,
That got weird.
Well, now Sheldon is packing, and we find out that he chose Bozeman, Montana. And Leonard makes a joke if he should forward his mail to the Bozeman Looney bin. But apparently there is a real comedy club called that. So do not forward his messages there, or his mail.
Let's check into that.
I did. So I did an IQ point on the crime rate of Bozeman and if there really is a loony bin. Did you?
I just did if there is a loony bin. So it's kind of small.
Let me know what you say.
Not in Bozeman. there's one in Little Rock and there's one in Tulsa, and apparently there was one in Wichita. And so that's like where I'm originally from, Wichita. So but it closed in 2023 after being like it opened in like 1999 or 2000. So it wasn't there while I was there, but apparently there are some, but not Bozeman. So
Yeah. Apparently, the comedy club in Bozeman is called the Last Best Comedy. And there's only one.
There's only one. But this is a work of fiction, so I'm allowing him to make that up. I am not okay with misinterpreting the words robbery and burglar. Man, burglar is hard for me to say. And like the verb form burglarize, like that, I cannot say that for the life. Burglarize.
Well, you just said it perfectly.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about it, but now like, that's the first time I've ever said it perfectly.
You have no credibility now.
I know.
Shut it down. We're done.
We're done. Just tell me about food, please.
Well, now we need to ask ourselves, how safe is Bozeman? And why did he choose Bozeman? So I'm guessing one of the main reasons Sheldon pushed for Bozeman is because Bozeman, Montana is the place where the first contact between humans and Vulcans were established in the Star Trek universe. But for some reason, I'm shocked that he didn't mention this in the episode.
What movie? Not Generations. First Contact, right? They go back in the past because the Borg are chasing them. Like, it's the only movie I really remember. I love that one for some reason. But they meet the guy who invents light speed. And he like just happens to do it while Vulcans are passing by. And they see him. And that makes humans worth talking to. Like, before that, they're like, humans are... like, you don't interfere with outer
triangles.
Life. Yeah, you ignore them basically. But with the light speed, they're like, okay, they've proven themselves. Which, if I remember correctly, the humans had just gotten done with like World War III, so everybody's like living in their own filth and rubbish and stuff. And he's built the spaceship out of like garbage. I might be making that up, but that's how I remember it.
Well, as for crime rate in 2010, I can't speak to that, like we said, but I found the data for 2024. And again, like we said, like each site is so different. I found very conflicting data. So according to bestplaces.net, it's a .net, so I don't know how trustworthy that is. But according to them, it is a very safe place. In terms of violent crimes, it's 14.5 out of 100. And the US shows an average of 22.7. So according to this, it's less than the average. And property crime is right at the US average of 40.2 out of 100. And then neighborhoodscout.com shows it as being totally awful. Like, the scaling was the opposite as well too. So their number, the higher the number, the safer it is, and 100% or 100 is the safest. So Bozeman scored 18. So that means it's safer than 18. It's So it's basically like
than St.
that
Louis.
Percentage. Yeah, yeah. But it's like, wow, like why is all the data showing different things?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then I went on a Bozeman news channel, KBZK, which reported this recently, February 20th, 2024. There has been an increase of 29% in felony cases in the last year. Yet the Bozeman police are still classifying Bozeman as a safe city, since this rise in criminal activity is directly proportional with the population increase. So even though numbers are up, its percentile is still the same. So according to the city itself, it's safe. Doesn't seem that safe, though.
If you're from Bozeman, let us know. Do you feel safe? I feel like I know a few people from there. I should ask them.
Do you really?
Yeah.
And they're still there?
I think they've moved. I'd have to double check because know some people from Bozeman. I know some people from another city by Bozeman. I get them all mixed up because I've never been into any of them. So
Are you going to ask them if they call themselves Bozites?
I will. Hey, Bozite.
Well, with all this happening, Howard gets in Sheldon's face that he should just kind of suck it up. Crime happens, which I didn't really like.
I like his story, though. I thought his story was hilarious.
Yeah. His story, oh my God. He says, when my great-grandfather first came to this country, he put all of his hopes and dreams into this little butcher shop he ran on the Lower East Side of New York. You know what happened? Every customer who walked into that butcher shop and asked for a pound of liver got ripped off. I love that. I was like, that took a turn. But those people moved on, and so should you. But I will argue that most of those victims at the butcher shop probably didn't even know.
Yeah.
Well, then Penny admits, like, oh, I'm going to miss you. And then Sheldon says that he's not good with prolonged goodbyes and maudlin displays of emotion, so he prepared a short video where he basically reiterates the exact same thing, admits that the four of you are three of my closest friends and one treasured acquaintance. And then he just basically straight up says, like, well, I don't really need you in my life, but do what you will with that information.
If you want to believe it, that's fine by me.
Yeah. Since you intend to remain in this lawless metropolitan area, statistics suggest that you will succumb to an awful fate.
Basically saying they're going to die.
Yep. And then, he does a Star Trek reference, live long and prosper, so it's kind of shocking that he didn't mention the Bozeman connection with Star Trek, but whatever. And then they turn around and he's gone. And then he pops in and says, you should close the door behind you. This isn't Bozeman. And then, $1 million question, Raj asks in Howard's ear, who's the acquaintance?
I really thought it was going to be Penny. That's what I'm going to say. At that point, I was thinking Penny. That's who I was betting on.
So now Sheldon arrives in Bozeman via bus, and it's freezing outside. And then a man comes by to help Sheldon with his bags, and then he just jacks him.
That young man is played a point for not being like him, because I hate it when people complain. Like, the weather's one thing, but like for some reason it really gets to me when it's about cold weather. When people say, oh, it's so cold out. Oh, man, it's freezing out. Brr, it's cold. It's so cold. Well, I like cold weather, but it's just, for some reason, that gets on my nerves. And, like, with Kelsey, I've gotten her down that once per day, she can say it's cold. After that, all bets are off. She's not allowed to say it. I can't take it. And I think...
Do you just not like the commentary on the weather?
I feel like it's overkill that people, when it's cold, they just like to complain about it. And it's like... I don't know, but I feel like other people feel this way when people say, like, oh, sure is a hot one. Like that apparently grinds on some people's gears. Like, have you ever heard that?
Yeah, because all you're technically doing is stating the obvious.
Yeah, so I feel that way about cold weather. Like, it's cold. Yeah, we get it. You don't have to keep saying it over and over again. And that's what Sheldon did. So I am 1 point not like Sheldon there. I would be, shut up, Sheldon. Put on a scarf.
You shut your face.
Shut your face.
Well, the young man that stole his luggage is played by Artie O'Daly. And he has a very long acting resume as well. A lot of shows that I've watched, and I do not remember him at all. He was in Modern Family, Silicon Valley, Chuck, Grey's Anatomy, and Scrubs. Granted, he just does a series of small roles.
Mm.
And then Sheldon instantly buys a ticket back to Pasadena.
One way to Pasadena.
Well, now we're at the ending. Sheldon returns home, and Howard addresses him, and we find out that he is the acquaintance, which I thought was hilarious.
I laughed loud, and I thought that was a great ending.
Which makes sense because he's roommates with Leonard, he works with Raj, and he's been getting closer and closer with Penny. and
Mm-hmm.
he has this huge disrespect to Howard because of his lack of a PhD. So it kind of makes sense. It does show that like they have been hinting about like the closeness relationship of Sheldon and Penny,
Yeah, yeah, it
because
makes
they do
sense.
act like brother and sister.
And he slept in
And
her
I'm
bed, right? So
yeah, that's true. It's like she helped him out when he needed it, when he got locked out and things like that.
hmm.
And I think he'll never really admit it, but I think in the back of his mind he does know how soft Penny is with him, that she is caring.
Yeah. Even though she pulls out a baseball bat and could go Nebraska on some guys.
Yep. Well, I was a little shocked in the beginning. Like, why did they not? If Sheldon Lee left, why wouldn't they have a party? Why wouldn't they throw a party?
Uh-huh.
But then it kind of clicked in. And I was like, they probably knew it wouldn't last. They probably had
Yeah.
bets about like about when he would come back.
That's my guess too. They probably had bets.
Well, that was the episode.
That's the episode.
Another one down.
Vanity
But
card?
before we call it, we have the
Vanity card. It's a long one.
God, these have been getting so weird
Yeah.
lately. It's like, I don't even know what to make of them. But here's the vanity card, everyone, at the very end of the episode. This is Chuck Lorre Productions 274. I have coined a new word, which I'm hoping will catch on. The word is fuv. Fuv came about due to my frustration with the phrase making love. Specifically, its inability to capture the wonderfully lusty, grunting nature of the act. I was also unsatisfied with the monosyllabic Anglo-Saxon word commonly used to describe intercourse. That word failed miserably at describing the deep spiritual and emotional bonding that can occur during sex. But now with my new word, couples engaged in that most intimate of human activities can look into one another's eyes, assuming they're facing one another, and whisper the simple, all-encapsulating phrase, I fuv you. And yes, they can do all that while listening to my new album of remakes of classic pop hits, including I fubbing you is wrong, I don't want to be right. Oh, sorry. If fubbing you is wrong, I don't want to be right. I feel like a fuv, and the immortal Come Rain or Come Shine, featuring the lyric, I'm gonna fuv you like nobody's fubbed you.
Fuv.
Fuv. Yeah, I don't know what to make of these vanity cards. Well, let's count some points.
Okie dokie. I am at 85 points, not like Sheldon, and we jumped up to 90 points like Sheldon. So quite a bit of Sheldon this episode. I think 5 might be the biggest differentiation we've had so far. So,
and 7 IQ points.
It's a good amount. I like these
not
because
too bad.
We really did prove that they got some stuff wrong that seemed pretty simple too. Like if you're gonna have them move to a city, like have a reason and make sure it's not St. Louis. I guess it's not St. Louis, so they got that. But
Yeah,
the Final Fantasies thing bugged me because I was always really big on why the hell did they just omit several Final Fantasies from the U.S. releases and say they'll never know, it's okay.
but we know.
We knew it all. We fubbed it. No, we didn't. Wait.
I fub you.
I fub you. Oh, fuck.
Well, anything else to add on this episode?
I think that's it. I think we did a good job.
Yeah. And I will say, like, just like old episodes, like, I feel like even though Sheldon is trying to be painted as, like, the loon, the crazy one, I feel like his reactions to a lot of things are very valid. Mm-hmm. And this is an episode that kind of shows that. Yes, we admit moving to a different state is an overreaction, but his fear is very real.
Yeah. And I feel like Leonard probably... It felt out of place that Leonard didn't have more fear.
Yeah. It's like, how are you shaking this off so quick?
Because it was an inside job.
Leonard wanted his comic book collect. Well, no, he would.
He wanted the
Oh, he's letting
laptop
it.
to steal the
Yeah.
stuff. He's gonna steal us information.
Oh, I was gonna say he let his guard down by stealing other things to
He's
let.
gonna
So
come
now
back.
Sheldon's guard is let down, and now he'll swoop in and take it.
To be fair, he was supposed to mail everything to Bozeman, so maybe that was his opportunity. Just not mail it. It's his for the taking.
Yeah. Oh, it must have got lost in the mail.
Leonard's a criminal genius.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
Cool. Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Theoretical Nonsense Pod. Email us at theoreticalnonsensepod@gmail.com and leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time when we talk Season 3, Episode 14, The Einstein Approximation. See you next time.
See you later.
This was Theoretical Nonsense, the Big Bang Theory watch-along podcast. No PhD required. Our intro and outro music is produced by Alex Kroll. Thanks for listening. I love you.
I love you.